Good evening, everybody. Be on. Test. All right, good evening. My clock just struck 6:30. Casey, can we get the volume up a little bit? Okay, how's that? Can you hear it? No, we're working on it. Test, 1, 2. Hello, hello, hello. All right. Louder. Casey, we all need some hearing help here. Look at this crowd. We have over 500 registrations for tonight's program. And we have dozens more who wrote saying, I can't be there, but can you record it? So we will be recording the session this evening to accommodate those folks. And I think it's safe to say that we have storm surge on our minds in this community. My name's Bob Moore. I'm the chair of the SanCap Resilience Steering Committee, and I'm happy to welcome you all here tonight. Many of our community leaders are here tonight, too many to acknowledge all of them, but I would like to acknowledge our elected representatives. Do we have some of our city council here tonight? If so, could you stand up, please? There's Mayor Mike Miller. Thank you very much. Welcome. And let's see, I see Richard Johnson there. Fantastic. I think you may get some others rolling in. Councilman John Henshaw wrote me this morning saying he wanted to be here, but he had to travel for work unexpectedly. So any other regional elected officials here? No? Okay. Our tireless and highly competent city manager, Dana Souza, are you here? There he is in the back. Thank you, Dana. And I did want to mention one other person, and that is our city's new Chief Resilience Officer, Ashley Painter. Ashley, could you stand, please? Right back here. So Ashley is pretty much brand new to the job, but is already involved in some really important projects for our community, including the recently completed vulnerability assessment and an upcoming adaptation plan, among others. And tonight's session is good preparation for us to become a more informed public to support that effort as it goes forward. I want to give some special thank yous. If I get this to work. There we go. Thank yous to our sponsors who made this program possible tonight: the Charitable Foundation of the Islands, the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, the Committee of the Islands, which, by the way, was the original inspiration for tonight's topic. They put that forward, that idea forward. So special thanks to the board of directors at the Committee of the Islands. And also the city of Sanibel, who helped our group apply for a grant from the Florida League of Mayors. So special thanks to Mayor Mike Miller for helping with that. I'd also like to thank all of our partner organizations for their continued support and help getting the word out about tonight's program. Each of these organizations does really fantastic work in our community, and I hope you support all of them. I hope you'll also support the community house that is hosting us tonight. Finally, I'd like to thank each of you. Your voice is important to the future of our sanctuary islands. And right now, SanCap Resilience is looking to capture your input regarding community resilience. And I hope each of you who live or work on the islands take a few minutes to complete our newest online survey. You'll find this QR code on signs scattered around the room. You'll also be finding emails in your inbox from our various partner organizations with a link to it. We'd like to get a really high level of participation, so please complete that survey. Now, by now, most of you are likely familiar with SANCAP Resilience, but for those of you who aren't, let me just take a couple of minutes to provide some background. SANCAP Resilience is not so much an organization as it is a coalition of concerned citizens and local organizations. It was established in January of 2023, just a couple months after Hurricane Ian tore through our community. And I should credit Councilman John Henshaw for being the first to suggest a citizen-led effort to help build community resilience in the wake of the storm. The SANCAP Resilience has been operating from two basic goals. The first has been to provide near-term support to help the community build back more resiliently. And the second has been to look to the future, to identify solutions that can help this community become a model of coastal resilience in the face of climate change. Tonight's program fits that goal. It will focus on solutions related to the necessary ways we must adapt to stronger storms, sea level rise, and storm surge as we face the current and future impacts of climate change. And there's also a second side to resilience when it comes to climate change, and that relates to mitigating the future impacts by reducing the sources of pollution that are warming our atmosphere and our oceans. Those are, of course, primarily the mining, transport, and burning of fossil fuels, but also our agricultural and industrial practices, our waste management, and more. Adaptation and mitigation have to work hand in hand, because if we don't change the way we power our homes, our businesses, and the broader economy, there will come a time, and I don't like to say this, but sooner than we'd like to think, where all the adaptation measures of the world will not be sufficient to handle the challenges we'll be facing. For those of us living on a barrier island and along the coast, that concern is particularly pressing. So when we hold future programs on solutions to address the causes of climate change and the tremendous economic opportunity that a clean energy economy represents, I hope to see all 500 of you here to participate. All right, with that said, let's move on to tonight's program. Both of tonight's presenters are nationally recognized thought leaders in their fields, and we couldn't be happier to have them with us tonight. Dr. Jules Bruck is the director of the School of Landscape Architecture and Planning and chair and professor of landscape architecture at the University of Florida. Prior to this role, she was the founding director of the landscape architecture program at the University of Delaware, which she established in 2016. In 2018, Dr. Bruck partnered with Delaware state agencies, faculty, and community members to launch the Coastal Resilience Design Studio, CRDS, an innovative academic initiative that offers interdisciplinary undergraduate internships focused on designing resilience strategies for coastal communities. CRDS has earned both national and state recognition for its impact, which includes catalyzing infrastructure investment, stimulating local economic development, and shaping land use policy. Several award-winning CRDS projects now serve as the foundation for her research at UF, where she has secured over $2 million in awards in just the past couple of years to collaborate with multidisciplinary teams and mentor students to advance large-scale, nature-based infrastructure and planning and applied design. Dr. Bruck has served as principal investigator and co-investigator on projects funded by agencies such as the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NOAA's Sea Grant, and the Delaware Department of Transportation. She's a member of the Network for Engineering with Nature and has guided student teams to state and national awards. Dr. Bruck is a registered landscape architect and was elected to the Council of Fellows of the American Society of Landscape Architects in 2024. So very impressive background. Jeff Carney is equally impressive in his experience, a professor at the University of Florida School of Architecture and director of the Florida Institute for Built Environment Resilience, known as FIBER. He's a registered architect and certified urban planner with extensive experience working at the intersection of housing, neighborhoods, ecosystems, and hazard mitigation, with a particular focus on community-scale adaptation to environmental risks. His research concentrates on supporting communities as they respond to compounding hazards, environmental stressors, and disaster recovery, balancing health, environmental, and housing needs through collaborative interdisciplinary approaches. In Florida, Jeff has led projects at Port St. Joe, Jacksonville, Cedar Key, and coastal Lee County, connecting academic research to real-world community engagement and resilience building. He currently leads the Gulf South Studio Initiative, funded by the National Academies of Sciences Gulf Research Program, known as NASEM, to integrate community engagement, advanced computational tools, and coastal resilience through studio-based design education. He also leads the Florida Digital Twin Initiatives, which you'll hear some more about tonight, leveraging urban digital twins to inform decision-making for the city of Jacksonville and across the state of Florida. Prior to joining UF, Jeff served as director of the LSU Coastal Sustainability Studio, where he developed the Louisiana Resiliency Assistance Program, LRAP, designed 10,000 square foot permanent exhibition for the LSU Center for River Studies, co-led the award-winning design submission, The Giving Delta for the Changing Course Design Competition, and started the Inland from the Coast research project supported by NASEM and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which assessed upriver flood impacts on community well-being in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Over his career, Jeff has led more than 45 funded research projects, totaling over $14 million, earning state and national recognition in architecture, planning, and landscape architecture. His work's been widely published and exhibited. Please join me in welcoming these two renowned speakers.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I want to thank Bob for all of his hospitality and for helping us arrange to be here this evening with all of you. Happy New Year. It's great to be here. And I wasn't nervous at all, even though this crowd size is really big, until I heard him read Jeff's bio. And I thought, wow, that guy's kind of a big deal. And I have to kick this off. So I'm going to be up here to try and impress Jeff Carney. Well, truly, we're so honored to be here, and we have so much to cover tonight. We're going to get through what we have to say and then have questions and answers at the end, and we look forward to that part of the program as well. So let me find the, there we are. Wonderful. It's really an exciting time for Jeff and I to have this opportunity to talk to this very large audience who chooses to be here on Sanibel Island. All of you wonderful people living the Florida dream. I know you all have personal stories tied to this place, whether it's your family history or that through your education or work, or maybe you're a newcomer, and either way, you're choosing to be here. And it's an easy place to fall in love with, the nature and the wildlife and the birds and the slower pace of life. And so it makes these conversations somewhat hard because we have to acknowledge the vulnerability of this place as well. And that's what we're going to do this evening. We're going to also talk about the vulnerability and the risks, which are becoming harder to ignore. Storm events are more frequent, infrastructure is stressed, heat and flooding and insurance costs are affecting daily life, and this creates some uncertainty, not just about the storms, but also about the future of living in this beautiful island. So we're here to talk tonight about building resilience to those threats, particularly storm surge, but we're going to cover a lot of other things as well. It's rare that we walk into a community and we're often here to address flooding, but we frequently end up talking about all the concerns that go into all of the community living, including social and economic concerns as well. So we're really excited to talk about achieving community-centered resilience and sharing that this is a process. And that's going to be one of our major themes for tonight, that community resilience is a process, and it takes time. But through designing with communities and our work at UF, we've developed this talk to share ideas about the current momentum and also the vulnerabilities, but also share with you what have other coastal communities done to really enhance their resilience in a changing environment. We want to share ways that communities have come together to form consensus, and then we're going to tell some stories about our work in communities where places that have taken action, and those are stories about projects that we've both worked on. So achieving resilience, in addition to being a process, is multidisciplinary, and there are socioeconomic and benefits that are derived from the nature-based and adaptive solutions that are all driven by technology. And so all of these systems are in play: the socioeconomic system, the ecological system, and the technological system. And we're going to talk a lot about that this evening. And you know this, especially the way these systems interact, because you live it. You exist on Sanibel as a model of resilience planning. This is a Sanibel plan. And nature has a seat at the table here, like no other place I've really ever visited. And that's exciting. It's an exciting place for a landscape architect to be presenting. And we know that nature brings a lot of benefits: water quality benefits, flood and surge benefits, and protection, habitat, tourism even, that all support the local economy. So it's an exciting thing to be thinking about, as well as what a deep technical endeavor this is. And tonight we're going to present the process associated with both the scientific and the technological aspects of community planning and design. So Sanibel is a really powerful example of the kind of integrated, interdisciplinary thinking dating back more than 50 years that is part of what we see as having a lot of shared values on the island. The island's planning history is rooted in shared values, and that the natural landscape is really what makes this site so special. And of course, early planning efforts were a direct response to the intense development pressures that we were seeing in the area. And we're so glad that this never came to fruition. And also, it is a result of community members that really valued all that Sanibel had to offer. And they organized, and they resisted, and they advocated, demonstrating what's possible when shared values are acted upon over time. So the Sanibel report was really informed by the groundbreaking, the Sanibel plan was really informed by the Sanibel report. And the Sanibel report was the ecological science that underpins the plan. And it was, therefore, not just traditional zoning. It's zoning that was the basis for determining development limits, fundamentally changing municipal planning in the state of Florida to state that we could base our development on eco zones. Groundbreaking and very exciting to see. And during the creation of that Sanibel report, the design firm WMRT was commissioned to develop the ecological science. And in 2024, I contacted Ann Winston's firm, who was the young landscape architect in 1975, who came to the island and created all these drawings, which you'll see if you dig into the Sanibel report. And It was a wonderful opportunity because she was about to retire from MIT, where she was a professor of landscape architecture, and sent all of her work to the archives at Harvard. And she said, I'll send you at the University of Florida copies of my work, which we printed and share with you tonight. And this has just been such a wonderful opportunity to get to know her and understand her process for how she works as a team, as part of this planning and design firm, to create this underlying identification of these ecozones. And along with identifying the ecozones, which you can see highlighted at the top here, and you're familiar with, they also outline the functions of the ecosystems and the limitations of development in those different ecosystems. And that is still the basis of decision-making 50 years later here on Sanibel. It's great to see. So Anne's firm shared this drawing with us from her archives, and this had never been published before. So this is new to us. It's not in the Sanibel report. And this is an exciting one, especially for me as an educator, because I can share this with my students and with community members and try to help break down what is the process underpinning a robust plan like this in development. And it's more than just the ecology. And I'll go walk through it so everybody can understand it a little bit better. But it goes from inventorying a whole bunch of different data sets that are both ecological and socioeconomic, on the way to understanding the permitted uses for each of the ecozones. And this drawing was all hand-drawn, which is remarkable to my students. It's not remarkable to me because I hand-draw all my plans, but it is a lot of work, and it may look very archaic to younger people, but the thinking was entirely contemporary, and it still holds weight because all the more contemporary design visualizations we're going to share with you today are all based on using this exact same process. And so let me walk you through it. I'm going to zoom in to some of the areas. The first area are the ecological constraints that were inventoried. The second are the socioeconomic constraints. And then everything in the middle is a synthesis of all that data to further get closer to the resolution of the permitted land uses and where are the limits of development on a fragile island. Very exciting to see this. And as I zoom in to the ecological, you can see some of the really important items that were inventoried and analyzed that represent the ecological constraints to development, from elevation to well locations and wildlife habitat. And they thoroughly documented each of these physical constraints to find the places where development could safely occur without disrupting its functions. Next, you can see the socioeconomic considerations and some of the ways of thinking about the system. So that ranges, for those of you who might have a hard time seeing it, from commercial enterprises to population, not just population in 1975, but population projections, so that they can really start to determine how will this impact this place. And traffic projections, which driving around the island today, I'm not sure if they got that right or not. But additionally, the documentation of the services on the centralized line, like water, sewer, power, and fire. And these are still things we're concerned with today. But all of this, again, synthesized into these permitted uses, a unit or density allocation, and the final land use plan. So this is not an easy process. It took a lot of people to make this happen. It wasn't just landscape architects. It was scientists, planners, engineers, landscape architects, all kind of people working together. And that's what we mean by when we say these are interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary endeavors. So nowadays, this is the same process, as I mentioned, that you'll see that we would take using GIS and different, technological formats to get to this type of result. But this was such a robust process that it stood the test of time, 50 years, and still holding. So I just really wanted to share that with all of you. Maybe a lot of you know that, but I think it's really important. And really what matters here is that it's a huge process, lots of experts to figure it out. And I would be deeply concerned if anyone came onto your beautiful island and said, here's the answer. Let's just do this. Because clearly it's very complicated. There is no answer that's going to just be dreamed up out of somebody's mind without really going through that difficult design process to get to the end result. And I have to tell my students that all the time because they have a lot of preconceived notions about what their design will look like before they collect all the data and synthesize all the information and pull it all together. And I have to pull them way back and say, that's not design, that's not planning. So I'm excited to share that with you. I also want to share some of our other maps from 1975 that show the historic ecological zones predating development. And I want you to keep an eye on the Mid-Island Ridge, which is right here in a darker color. And I'm pointing to that because it's pretty easy to see even from the back. So it's darker in color. It's also an important ecological zone for the island, as well as the interior wetland basin. Both of those ecosystems play a huge role in ecosystem functions. They support flood protection, freshwater stability, ecological integrity, and even evacuation safety. So it's really an important ecosystem. And what you're going to see on the next map are the existing conditions in 1975. So once we started developing on the island. And what you can really see here is the areas become fragmented. And that fragmentation, to be fair, completely changed the nature of the island. Had the plan not been in place to limit the growth. And then it happened the cartoon that I showed earlier. But instead, the plan stopped that fragmentation. And fragmentation is an important word because as ecosystems get chopped up into smaller pieces, they lose some of their functional ability. And that's why we like to have intact ecosystems as best we can. So fragmentation of the interior wetland basin would contribute to converting water storage into runoff, for example, or could result in longer flood duration or reduced storm surge ability. So it's a really interesting, when you look at the next map, which is one that my student drew in 2024, you're going to see that the fragmentation didn't continue unchecked. It really was stabilized by the Sanibel plan, and that's exciting. Now the colors have changed in the next plan. So you're going to see the dark Mid-Island Ridge. She used yellow, and there you have it. You see it's changed a little bit, but really the fragmentation could have been so much worse had we not been relying on the plan as a decision-making tool to limit development in those important areas, the wetland basin, and in the ridges. So I thought that was really great to see. So the student also, this is Megan Mickelson's work, by the way, she graduated with her master's degree in 2024. She also worked to look at the ecological zones under a moderate sea level rise projection. And the sea level rise projection were based on historic trends, nothing terribly extreme, but the bottom line is that it matters less really how many inches of sea level rise. We all can tell that the water is rising in an island. You really probably tell that easier than I can in Gainesville. So it's happening. But these are really important for future predictions, even if we're over aggressive on that future prediction, so that we can guide adaptation planning. And we can say, let's say, some of the wetlands or mangrove areas in this area will be threatened by rising waters. What is a solution that we put into place today to help to shore up those ecosystems? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And soon, we're going to get into the tools in the toolbox that other communities are using that will help with these types of situations. So when we were working on that project with my graduate student, I got the opportunity to visit. This was in summer of 2024. And I came along with Tom Ankerson, who some of you may know, is a professor emeritus in environmental law at UF, and the film crew from WRT, who was the original firm who put the Sanibel plan together. They dropped the M, it's now WRT, but they were here on the island doing a documentary film. If you scan the QR code, it's a story map that shows all of the Ansburn lectures that she describes her process, as well as the documentary film by WRT. And it was just a really great way for me to get an introduction to the island. And that's why I'm so grateful to have an opportunity to come back and share a little bit about what we learned. And I'll put that QR code back up at the end. But Megan really looked at precedent projects from around the globe to make very light design recommendations for nature-based strategies that would work in harmony with natural processes rather than against them, such as using sand engines, which is, this is in the Netherlands, where sand is put out of the range of the shoreline and it is allowed to drift back onto the beaches. It's a process of bringing sand back onto your shore. We also looked at dune restoration, which has been really a valuable tool, and a ton of research has been done since particularly Superstorm Sandy, where their dunes were damaged, but even though they were damaged, they served their function, which was to reduce the storm surge. And they then needed repair. So the question is, how do we repair them? And how do we repair them quickly? So we now know a lot more about dune restoration than we did 15 years ago, which is exciting. But that's a really important storm surge technique. And we also look at thin layer placement and thick layer placement. These are processes where dredge sediments are pumped toward the shore, either to form barrier islands so that those can serve as storm protection, or to shore up the area around the natural fringing system, like a marsh typically, but it's also a mangrove system. So that's an exciting technique as well. In addition to that, of course, you looked at offshore breakwaters, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about breakwaters vegetation, as well as the use of native plants abundantly throughout your ecosystem. And again, I'll talk about that as well. So Sanibel has a lot of momentum right now. You already have a completed and completely improved vulnerability assessment. That's great. Adaptation plan, updates to stormwater and transportation plans, energy planning is underway, continued beach and dune restoration, lots of momentum here. So throughout the whole time, what's really striking is the public alignment. Again, back to the shared values. What is the percentage of residents who are concerned about future climate impacts? Storm surge, heat, increased insurance costs. pretty high, 84% of those who were surveyed in the 2024 SANCAP Resilience Community Survey. So I hope you take the survey, because it's important for us to keep up with these numbers. How many surveyed community members want Sanibel to be a model resilience community, coastal community? That's 95%. That's alignment, and that's exciting. And 100% of you are here tonight. And that means a lot. You are engaged and ready to learn. You have this shared foundation, you have this shared history, you have one of the most iconic planning documents ever created. And that is so exciting because you have a commitment to keep moving forward. And that's what's going to matter in community engaged resilience planning. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to talk about understanding vulnerability through his work in Port St. Joe.
Hey, is this on? No, okay. It was my chance to be nervous for just a second. This is a great crowd. It's great to see everybody here. Thank you all for joining us tonight. So I'm going to talk about vulnerability, but getting deeper into it than I think we often imagine it. So I'm going to talk about this through a project we did at Port St. Joe. And so real briefly, the institute that I run, Fiber, we do a number of different things. I'm not going to get into all the different labs and the research projects that we work in many places across the state. I'm going to speak tonight about the three projects in the top, Port St. Joe, Cedar Key, and Jacksonville. So first, our work in Port St. Joe. We started in just 2019, right after Hurricane Michael, working in the city as supported through the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. The Jesse Ball DuPont Fund is the family foundation that actually became related to the paper mill that was the St. Joe Paper Company that was in Port St. Joe. So they do work in Jacksonville and they do work in Port St. Joe. And right after the hurricane, they reached out to us and said, we need help. And so we started working with them. And I put the three funders down here. This is really important. There were really three focuses of this work. One was the work we did through the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. The second was the vulnerability assessment and resilience plan that we did through FDEP, which is the same process that the city of Sanibel is going through right now. And so I'll talk about that real briefly. And then third, the National Academy of Sciences Gulf Research Program. And so this slide is from a video, and I would encourage you, if you want to watch it, it's about a 20-minute documentary of the work we did in Port St. Joe. This program was called In Times of Crisis, Stories from the Gulf of Mexico. And our video was titled after Michael, Memory and Reinvention in Port St. Joe. And what we were looking at, and where this comes into this conversation about vulnerability, is that oftentimes when we recover from a disaster, there's a huge, there's a moment of all hands on deck, everyone comes together, and well, we won't let that happen again, right? We're going to fix, we know what went wrong, and we're going to fix those things. A couple of years later down the road, those things have been kind of maybe a little bit fixed. Maybe they've been swept under the carpet. And then 15 or 20 years down the road, lo and behold, there's another storm and the same thing happens again. And so how do we not recreate the same cycles that happen? And what we were getting at is the depth of the relationship between social vulnerability, environmental vulnerability, and the technical tools we have to work through these things. And so to really point out that the sort of the systems that precede that established, or the social systems that exist in a place, really have a huge bearing on how that place is resilient and adapts to change over time. And so we were looking at the kind of relationship between the community and the risks they face. Now, this slide is the vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan for the city of Port St. Joe. This is the FDEP project. And I'm going to just, I can actually, let me, not exact order here. So this is an image of just a kind of collection of the work we did with the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, from courses that we've taught to small research projects to workshops, a whole range of efforts that we went through over the course of the last 5 years. So those three things together, this is actually from the FDEP funded vulnerability assessment. So obviously this is a pretty technical document. This is looking at different flood depths over different years. You look at 2040, you look at 2070, you look at a series of different flood sort of storm outcomes from a 2-year return period to a level 5 hurricane. And then you look at the vulnerability of very specific assets. I'm not going to get into and explain all this. This is the road network and how much inundation each road would face. And that's the vulnerability assessment that we do through FTE. And so we find areas of sort of particular risk. But what I want to talk about is balancing that technical knowledge base with the social, with the community that underlies. And I'll use this example. This is one of the maps. This is a sort of a flood map, and you can see obviously the blue along the coast and the red in the back, blue being more water. And you see this line sort of back off sort of the band in the inland area. That's the canal runs through the middle of the community. And so the video that we did, we were interested in this place because that canal actually cuts a sort of a transect through the entire city. And so we interviewed people from each part of the town and found this incredible diversity of people. From to the north side, you have where the factory used to, paper factory used to be. This is about a 90% African American community, depressed when it comes down to the housing quality and the quality of the environment. The middle of the city, low lying, actually the lowest lying area, more of a middle class area. This David Ashford was one of the elected officials. And then to the south, more along the coast, you have larger beach houses and larger sort of houses, trustee names. All of these people are suffering the same thing. Their houses are falling into the creek. And so there was this kind of across the diversity of this place of kind of an upwelling of connection that really started to draw people together. And I think it was really important because at the beginning, there was this kind of like one board saying, Joe, we're all going to come together. Well, that only lasts so long. But as soon as we could start to say, look, fixing that creek is something that we could fund, something that we could look at through the vulnerability assessment. That's when it started to become real. So the video interviewed these people and a number of other people. But one of the things we did in conjunction with the video and the FTP vulnerability assessment was to do a community walk. And so we started in North Port St. Joe. We connected with community members. It was about a 6-hour process. Connected with community members, walked all the way through the city, all the way out to the other end. People sort of joined the walk along the way. This was a group of community members and experts from hydrologists to landscape architects to a range of our academic and professional partners. And so that effort, I feel it is very important to the outcome of the plan, was that connection between the technical and the social, the knowledge of place. And so what emerged was a plan that really was based on the sort of the transect relationship of different strips, whether it was disperse, drain, retain, consolidate, retain, or develop, conserve. Those are consistent kind of ecologically, but the neighborhoods were all quite different. So there was a sort of a weave that developed. This was the initial concept based on these sort of themes that emerged. This conceptual plan became the adaptation plan that we presented after about 2 years worth of work. Really became the plan. So the foundation of this plan is technical. It really was social, and it really was ecological. And that led to the updates to their land use ordinances. So taking that all the way from an understanding of the community and the neighborhoods themselves and the people, through an understanding of the environment and the potential technical solutions, all the way sort of to the adaptation land use overlay plan that was delivered to the city. So I'm going to change gears a second and talk about some of the projects that we have. After we do the vulnerability assessment, and I think that the city of Sanibel is at this point right now doing a vulnerability assessment, doing a resilience plan. What do we do what is the project? What's the end result? What's the actual thing that we get to enjoy in the end? And I think it's important to really point out that I shouldn't say that it's an exciting time because there's been a bunch of disasters, but it's an exciting time in terms of design. In the last 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, we've seen this kind of upwelling of innovative and really truly kind of transformative design work that's come out of really globally, but in this country especially, as a response to some of the challenges that we've been facing. And so we're going to go back and forth and just give a couple of quick examples of work that's happening all around the country. This is a project for the University of Southern Mississippi's Gulf Coast Research Lab by Lake Plato and Unabridged Architecture. And I point this out, this was after Hurricane Katrina, and this is 20 years ago. And I think it was an incredible moment in living in coastal environments in this country where we said, you know, a real reckoning of like, should we be here? Should we be here? Should we not be here? Should we put a giant wall around our community and hunker down? And there was a range of those responses. I lived in Louisiana just a couple of years after that, but one of the things that we did there was the Corps of Engineers came in and built a gigantic wall and certainly, rebuilt the levee much taller than it was before. One solution. Other solutions were complete evacuation, complete, let's leave this community. It's too dangerous. We can't be here, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge that all of those options exist. But what I want to show here is we can stay, right? We can live there, and design is a really important aspect of that story. And so this example was a project. I won't get into all of the details, but it was looking at a site that had been demolished, and it was this research laboratory before, and the university wanted to put it back. And so they did an incredible project of locating it on the highest possible piece of land, the piece of land that was least ecologically vulnerable. All of the systems were built for flooding, for long-term adaptation of the landscape. So it's sort of an early project, I think, in this 20-year process that we're on. Another example is more recent. This is Hurricane Sandy, and this is in Sheepshead Bay, New York, designed by a company called Gans & Co. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that resilience is expensive. Sometimes it is not easy. And if you're going to take housing that is old and dilapidated and vulnerable, and you're going to replace it with elevated, resilient housing, it costs money. And how do we do that in a way that can enable people to live there? And I think this is more of an open question. We have to imagine new ways of living. We have to imagine new ways of creating resilient communities. And this is a great example. This was a community of small cottages that existed on a mews. And a mews is an alley where all of the yards opened up into this kind of collective alley where everybody shared in the community. And it had been worker housing decades ago. It was demolished by Sandy, and the community got together and wanted to rebuild. And the solution was to build that mews up, right? They had to elevate the houses by code. You had to build above the flooding. And so in order to do that, every single person would need a stair, every person would need an elevator, and that was cost prohibitive. So the proposal was to build that mews as shared infrastructure, elevated, provide garden space, community space, and then you could build 2 stairs and 1 elevator instead of an elevator for every house. So simple as it is, just an example of how we can imagine new ways of building housing, building dense housing where we share in collective infrastructure. So I'm going to pass it to Jules.
Yes, so the next project that I want to talk about is one of the most well-known nature-based infrastructure projects probably ever developed. It's done by a landscape architecture and planning firm called Scape, and it's called Living Breakwaters. It's in Staten Island, New York. Some of you may have heard about this. It's been on the news a lot. Breakwaters are great for reducing wave energy, erosion, and damage from storms, waves, right? So they're really like a speed bump for water and waves. And where I'm going to show you some slides in a little bit that shows it doesn't necessarily stop the wave from getting to the shore, but it can lessen the impact and therefore make it a less catastrophic event. So breakwaters have gotten a lot of attention, especially since this very famous project became on the scene and won very important design contests along the way. And breakwaters are living when they provide habitat. And so they have dual functionality or co-benefits. Not only do they reduce risk and break up the wave energy, they provide aquatic habitat and they're good for water quality and they're good for the marine life. And so it can actually help with tourism and it really slows down the wave energy behind the breakwater. So recreational activities can occur in that area. Lots of co-benefits. So that's a really nice project that's been happening for a while. It just got installed. As Jeff mentioned, this is also an expensive adaptation suggestion or strategy. Living breakwaters are both not simple to develop and they're also very expensive. I think this was like $50,000 a linear foot of breakwater. It was incredibly expensive. That's New York. Maybe it wouldn't be as expensive in Florida, but it really, these projects are complicated, but they do work to reduce wave energy. And we know that, and a ton of research has been going into this. Researchers all across the world are studying how well they reduce energy. And so that's good news because they also deliver on the ecology and they deliver on social benefits, as I mentioned. And the nice thing about this group is they partnered with the Billion Oyster Project and a community action committee to really educate the community about the value of the breakwaters and those associated benefits. And I think that that's the really important part of talking to you about living breakwaters as a project. It's a step in community-driven resilience planning to educate others about the value of that infrastructure. So I think that that's really important. And the important thing about these slides are that you could also partner with the university to do engagement planning or adaptation planning, excuse me. And this is a project that was done at NC State by the Coastal Dynamics Design Studio led by Andrew Fox and other faculty there. And they really work with communities to help communities envision futures that may otherwise feel really abstract or even intimidating by developing these plans. And plans like this, which is an award-winning plan that they developed with their students who were both architecture and landscape architecture students, have really unique ideas in them. Like we can have buoyant architecture and architecture that can move with water. So that's not a new idea, but it's something that we need to start revisiting as an idea. So lots of exciting things and lots of ways that you can partner with the universities. And these students go through the exact same process that Anne Spurn went through, that diagram that I showed you. They inventory everything. They take all the data down. They do the history, the climate, the soils, and everything. And they synthesize all that. And they create these small drawings that are the full analysis of it, so that it's the synthesis of that information. And importantly, they share back with the community at every stage. So while you're thinking about community-driven engagement and adaptation planning, resilience and adaptation planning, you have to remember that this is every step of the way working with community, just like Jeff said, walking with community, seeing everything that is here through your eyes and trying to make the plan reflect what's really happening here. And we do a lot of things that help us understand what you're seeing, including using citizen science like apps that will allow you to share with us as designers where is this flooding on a sunny day. Share that with us so we can know and we can help deal with that as a design solution. And ultimately, they come up with a beautifully rendered design, and the community can be involved in every step of the way. So by the time the design is unveiled, it's vetted, and people are in agreement that this is a great solution. And with that, these plans become very catalytic. They help drive funding toward individual projects. And so this is where we think it's an important place for you all to move forward, getting those visualizations created. And the next thing that Jeff is going to talk about is some of those visualization techniques that can, again, help with securing funds to move you toward an implementation of a large project, a large infrastructure project that could really help with some of those storm surge concerns. So I'm going to turn it back to Jeff to talk about building consensus through visualizations.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Florida Digital Twin and the JAX Twin project that we're working on in fiber. And so the first question is, what is a geospatial digital twin? No one? I didn't know what a geospatial digital twin was 3 years ago either. So this was has been an odyssey for me as well. So a geospatial digital twin is as you can imagine, it's a computational replica of a real system. That is not just a model. It's not just a replica that sort of sits on its own. It's usually fed by monitored information. So you might be monitoring traffic or monitoring water levels or temperature, and that's feeding into the model, and there's a constant update. The more sophisticated it gets, you're able to change things. So let's just say you're making real-time changes to the traffic patterns. The system is reading and resetting the model. So there's real-time changes. So if you were to change the traffic pattern, well, now the sensors are going to read a different thing, and then you can continue to tune that. So the digital twin is not just a sort of a replica sitting over here doing its own thing. It's a replica that is constantly feeding back and forth to the real system. So that's the sort of the overview of that. And I want to put this in the context of the drawings that Jules showed in the discussion of the Sanibel plan. Those are extremely sophisticated drawings, but they're not using supercomputers, right, at that time. So now you take the same concept of a map of an ecosystem, or a map of sea level rise, or a map of topography, or a map of how transportation systems work, and you computationally replicate that. It becomes, a million times more complicated. And then you start to layer them on top of each other. Suddenly you have something that, instead of a static drawing, you have models of systems that are connected. So the traffic is connected to the water pollution and connected to the health data and the housing data. All of these things are connected. How do we make a decision in that world, right? Like, how do you actually stop for a second and say, okay, now I actually have to solve a particular problem? I think it's a real challenge that we've gotten to a point where there's so much data and so much information that it becomes difficult to make decisions. And so we're doing the digital twin part of this, but as designers and planners, and we have computer scientists as well, luckily, but they're not steering the ship, right? This is a designer planner effort. And the reason I say that, so this is the model of the sort of the drawing of the JAX twin, this Jacksonville digital twin. And we had incredible information on health, housing, infrastructure, and environment. To put the health data in context, we had every emergency room visit for the last 10 years into the UF Health in Jacksonville. So when someone came in, where they lived, what their ailment was. We didn't have personalized data, and we don't actually have the location, but that information is in the system. So an incredibly rich amount of data to be able to connect people's health outcomes to storm occurrences, or their relationship between their health and the transportation system that is next to them, or how their health is correlated or not correlated to the cost of housing. These are really incredible data sets. We took those and started to test them and understand better how they responded, in this case, specifically to a model event of Hurricane Ian. Hurricane Ian crossed the state and affected Jacksonville pretty severely. Not as much as it affected the West Coast, know that, but it did have quite an impact on Jacksonville as well. And so we looked at that and built what comes into this interface. I think one of the important things about a digital twin is that it's visual, and that is one of what we think is important. Is that it's a three-dimensional tool to see these systems interacting, and most importantly, it is about these decision makers and the engagement. And I would say that, you know, I started this from here and worked my way around here. I think it doesn't grow up and started. In fact, when we did this work, we started interviewing people at the same time that we were looking at the model, at the same time we were better understanding the story, and the same time that our computer programmer was developing this interface. So it was looking at all of these things at once, but the goal of this is to enable people to make better decisions with the kind of proliferation of data that we have at our fingertips today. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Computicity. Crash.